This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we're going to take a look at some of the numeric functions and look at it from this perspective of SQL Server and then the equivalent function in Oracle. The very first one that we want to start out with is the round function, and with both Oracle and SQL Server they provide this capability where we can provide the number and then the length that we want it to round to, essentially that number of digits. And then for SQL Server, we have an optional parameter, and then we'll take a look at how we can achieve the equivalent to that additional parameter in Oracle. So let's bring over SQL Server. We'll start there. And in this case, maybe we have a number, and it's going to be something like rounding 777.777, maybe to 2 digits. That's what we want to do. If we execute this, we can see that it's going to essentially round to that second digit, just as we indicated that we wanted it to, so to the second decimal place. What happens if we go ahead and add a non-zero value as the third parameter? If I do that, it's essentially going to truncate that to the second digit. So where we had 777, now it's going to be 770. If we bring over SQL Developer and we do essentially the same type of rounding, we're going to put in the same number. This is going to be to 2 digits. We have to specify from dual for a table. If we do this, it's going to round it to that 2 digit. But how do I achieve that truncation to the second digit? So if I replace the round with a trunc, that's going to essentially change it so that it truncates that value to 77, similar to what we saw when we added that non-zero parameter there for our round function. Now if we go back to our numeric functions chart, we have the is_numeric, and it's going to essentially take an expression and check to see whether it's numeric or not. It's going to return a 1 or a 0. So 0 is going to be false and 1 is going to be true. So let's bring over SQL Server and let's test it out. So this is the is. We're going to pass in ABCD. That should fail. We should get 0 back. And we do. If we change this out to be 1, 2, 3, 4 and execute that, we should get back true. We can even put in 1, 2, 3, 4 without the quotes, and it's going to return 1 to us as well. If we go to Oracle SQL Developer, there is no built-in is_numeric function. We can achieve that with a really messy case statement, and I'm going to actually copy in the statement because I'll never be able to reproduce it without messing it up. It's going to use a case statement along with a regular expression. We can take a look at the regular expression, and we can see that it has provisions for the plus and minus. It has any number of digits, 0 through 9. It has a potential period that it's going to allow, and then more digits after that period that would be at the end of the string. So it's going to return 1 if it matches that pattern. If it doesn't match, it's going to return 0. So if I go through and execute it with that ABCD, it's going to return 0. If I go ahead and put in 1, 2, 3, 4 and execute this case statement, it's going to return 1. If I change that out and remove the quotes and execute it again, it's going to return 1. So that is essentially the equivalent. You can also go through and write a function and store it in the database that can be called but that's beyond where we are in this class at this point. Typically in the past, when I've needed some type of function like this, I've put it in some type of a utility package and then called that function instead of doing this messy case statement within a SQL statement. Now, if we go back to our chart, the next one that they want us to look at is the absolute number. So it's going to return the absolute value. If it's negative, it's going to return a positive. So we're going to test it with a negative number. And this is just going to be select ABS of -1, 2, 3, 4. If I execute this, I should see 1, 2, 3, 4. If I bring over SQL Developer, and I'm going to extend this just a little bit here. If I select the absolute of -1, 2, 3, 4 from dual, and you see that I took out my parenthesis there, should put it back in. And if I execute this, I can see that I'm getting back 1, 2, 3, 4. If we go back to our chart, we have the ceiling. The ceiling is going to return the smallest integer greater than or equal to the number. And I think the way that we can illustrate this the best is to use a negative number. If we're looking for the smallest integer greater than or equal to the number, it's going to round it closer to 0 as opposed to farther away from 0. When we get to the floor, it's going to go farther away from 0. So if we look at this, let's go ahead and bring over SQL Server and try the ceiling. This is going to be -3.5. If we execute this, this should give us -3 as opposed to -4, and it does. And essentially do the same thing, although this time instead of ceiling, we're going to just use ceil. When we execute this, it should give us the exact same thing, that -3. Now, the next one they want us to try is going to be the floor, which in this case, we should see that it's going to give us -4 when we do 3.5. That's what it's giving us. If we come over and do floor over here, we have -4. If we go back to our chart, the next operation that we have in SQL Server is we have the square, and we can provide some type of a number, and it's going to give us the result of squaring that number. With Oracle, we're using the power and indicating that we're raising it to the second power. So let's go ahead and let's try it in SQL Server. So in SQL Server, we have select, and this is just going to be square. And let's use something like 64. If we execute this, we should expect 4096. If we do this in Oracle, this is going to be the power that we're using, and we're going to specify our number and then 2. So in this case, it's going to be 64, 2 from dual, and that should also give us 4096. You see that here. We go back, we have the square root. In both cases, it's using square root. Let's go with SQL Server first. Let's go with square root of the 4096. We should see the 64 being returned. Let's execute that. We do see 64. If I go to Oracle, I do the same thing. 4096 from dual. Execute that. I have 64. Now going back, we have the last function, which is the random function. In SQL Server, it's the rand, and in our Oracle database, we have to use the dbms_random. So this is a package, and we're executing and getting a value back from that package. Let's go ahead and execute that first in SQL Server. Now, the next one I want to try is what happens if I go ahead and do a rand. Is this going to give me a number between 0 and 1? I can see that there. If I decide that I want to try to simulate a dice roll, I'm going to be getting a value that starts with 1 and goes to 6. If I take 6 and subtract 1, that gives me 5. So I want to go ahead and my random number that I generate, I want to multiply that by 5. To that, I want to go ahead and add 1. And then I'm going to round this to 0 digits because I don't want it to have any decimal place at this point. So if I execute that, and I can do it multiple times, I should get numbers between 1 and 6. You can see that we're getting those. So that is going to simulate the dice roll there. So how do I do this in Oracle with that DBMS package call? So if I come over into Oracle, I can go ahead and do a select from the DBMS random.value. And if I do this from dual and execute this, it should give me a number between 0 and 1. If I want to get that dice roll, then what I would need to do is go ahead and multiply this by 6. And I'm going to go ahead and trunk the value before I add it to 1. And that should give me a number between 1 and 6. So if I execute this and just keep executing, should give me numbers between 1 and 6. So we got that 6 there. So that's the way I would simulate that dice roll using that DBMS random function.